I've been wanting to make this video for such a long time, and today is the day. I'll be upcycling some of the absolute ugliest things that I could find at the thrift store. The challenge was to see if I could turn them into something that I would actually use in my own home. And to be fair, I did not pick the items out myself. Instead, I asked a variety of people, like a Goodwill employee, even a complete stranger, to pick out the ugliest thing they could find. And let me tell you, they picked out some, shall we say, interesting items. Want to see what I did with them? Then let's get started.
Although I love to talk about all the great things that you can find at thrift stores, the truth is that you'll also find some of the strangest and ugliest things you have ever seen. Okay, so what did you find?
I found this little guy.
Okay, a little gourd.
Gourd. He kind of
Scarecrow.
looks very warty.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. I will see what I can do with him.
Probably the most hideous lamp I've ever seen.
Okay, yeah, that's a statement piece.
I'm not even sure what it is.
I think it's a desk for a doll.
Could be a doll desk.
Okay, that looks straight out of the 70s to me. Can't wait for you to see this spoon transformation. It is virtually unrecognizable. I decided to start this challenge with the ugly lamp, honestly because I couldn't wait to take it apart and see what it looked like. I unscrewed and removed the 4 plexiglass panels, only to discover what I am estimating to be about 50 years worth of dust. With the plexiglass removed, it was reminding me of a wood lantern, and since the wiring was so old, I just decided to go ahead and remove all of the electrical. Usually there are just a few nuts, one always on the bottom, that are holding everything together. So once you loosen those nuts and cut the wires, the lamp usually disassembles fairly easily. I didn't care for the modern silver base on the lamp, and so instead of returning it, I created feet by gluing 4 blocks of wood, 1 in each of the bottom corners. I let the wood glue set up for about 10 minutes, and then I used a brad nailer, inserting 1 brad nail in the center of each foot. Then I flipped the lantern over and attached a wood round to the top of the lamp using wood glue and a few brad nails. Next, I superglued a screw ring into the hole in the top of one of the pieces that I had removed from the lamp. Next, I used wood fill to fill all of the screw holes, and then I let it dry for a couple hours. Once it was dry, I came back with some sandpaper and sanded it smooth. Because I wanted to re-stain the wood, at this point I just decided to take it outside and give the whole thing a good sanding with my orbital sander. Then I stained it by brushing on watered-down antiquing wax and then immediately wiping it off. Next, I attached the random lamp piece with the screw ring to the wood round on the top of the lantern using E6000. I had spray painted them black and then decided to go ahead and paint the wood round black to match. I was looking at the 4 pieces of plexiglass lying on my craft table, wondering if there was something I could do with them. And then I thought, well, everything looks pretty with an IOD transfer on it. And so I pulled a few out, and here's what I did. I took 2 pieces of the plexiglass and pushed them together, and then I cut out a large floral design from the Whispering Willow IOD package. Then I transferred the image to the plexiglass by rubbing over it using the plastic tool that comes in every package. The transfer stuck really well to the plexiglass, maybe better than anything I've ever used it on before. Once the image was completely transferred, I used a utility knife to cut between the 2 pieces of plexiglass. I decided to add a few more images because, well, doesn't everything look better with a butterfly? I ran some twine through the screw hole at the top of each piece of plexiglass for easy hanging. Unfortunately, my camera was out of focus, but for the other 2 pieces of plexiglass, I transferred a series of butterfly and egg images.
I wanted to take a break for just a minute to tell you about my sweet friend Sarah of Sarah's October Home. I have been watching her channel for quite a while now, and I really just wanted to share it with you. Sarah is a girl after my own heart. Her home is always a work in progress, and she's an avid thrifter who loves to decorate on a budget, but with an occasional splurge thrown in. I think you'll find Sarah to be such a kind-hearted person and a true inspiration. So I hope you'll check out her latest video where she too is trying to transform a few ugly things. I'll have it linked for you in the description box below.
I actually thought this hand-painted sliced spindle was kind of cute, but I can understand why other people would find the face a little creepy. And honestly, it's not something that I would use in my own home. So if you like it, please forgive me for painting over most of it. I found a piece of my stash that had come off of an old outdoor lantern, and I painted that with the same white chalk paint that I had used on the half spindle. When the paint was dry, I lightly distressed both pieces with some sandpaper. There was a hole in the front of the lantern piece, and I lined that up on the top of the spindle so that I could pre-drill a screw hole. Then I attached the lantern piece to the spindle using a washer and a wood screw. I decided there was too much contrast between the white chalk paint and the original blue paint, and so I distressed the blue paint a little and then went over the entire spindle with some white wax. I thought the lantern piece needed a little something extra, and I found a metal bird and some leaves in my stash, which I attached using a combination of E6000 and hot glue. I liked the rusty appearance of the metal pieces, but I wanted to tone down the colors just a little bit by applying some white wax over the birds and leaves. Even though Spencer and Madison thought that this doll desk, as they called it, was extremely strange, you know I thought it had great potential. I love natural wood, but not when it has orange or, in this case, yellow undertones. So I decided to paint the piece with some white chalk paint. But I did leave the legs natural. When the paint was dry, I lightly distressed it with sandpaper and then applied a coat of clear wax to seal and protect the paint. I thought this little bench would make a great planter. I started by adding a piece of styrofoam into the box at the top. I topped that with a little Spanish moss. I cut down some Walmart lavender stems and stuck those into the styrofoam. I wanted whatever I sat on the bench to be removable, and so I found this little wicker basket in my stash and thought it would look super cute with a little bird's nest propped inside. I just twisted a little angel hair vine into a circle and secured it with florist wire, and then added some Spanish moss in the middle. To add another layer of interest to this little bench, I added some styrofoam inside the small drawer and added a few stems of greenery to droop out the side. And of course, I thought the bench needed a few bird eggs and a transparent Dollar Tree butterfly sticker. My friend Kelly picked out this vase that she thought was super ugly, which actually surprised me because I thought it was pretty. In fact, I liked it so well that I thought all it needed was some pretty flowers. So that's what I did. I hot glued some styrofoam inside the vase and added some bright pink peony stems from my stash. However, as pretty as it was, I wasn't sure that this was enough to convince Kelly. So I decided to brush on some white wax, dabbing off the excess, and see if that would tone down the bright colors on the vase just a bit. My friend Michelle, who owns Maddie's on Main in Wyanett and Princeton, Illinois, two fabulous stores, by the way, picked out this foil-covered owl as the ugliest thing in her entire store. It took a minute, but I picked off all of the foil that had been glued to the plaster owl. Then I took a little plaster Paris and mixed it with some latex paint and brushed it over the owl to cover up the dried glue residue. I thought about applying some antiquing wax over the owl, but I really liked the clean white look. I wanted to try framing the owl with an old ceiling light fixture from my stash. I used a utility knife and a metal ruler to cut out a piece of hardboard to the same size as the piece of glass from the light fixture. I covered the hardboard with spray adhesive and then adhered a piece of pretty scrapbook paper. At first, I thought about staining the wood of the light fixture, but ultimately I decided to paint it in a coordinating color, hazelnut by Waverly. When the paint was dry, I lightly distressed the edges with sandpaper and then applied a coat of antiquing wax, wiping away the excess. I decided to attach the owl to the sunken inside or the inside of the light fixture. So first, I adhered the hardboard to the center of the light fixture using a combination of E6000 on two sides and hot glue on the other two. To attach the owl to the hardboard, I first adhered it with hot glue, but I knew there was a chance that over time the paper would peel away from the hardboard. So I turned it over and screwed a small screw through the hardboard and into the back of the owl. At the start of the video, you saw the young lady who selected this warty scarecrow as she described it. And since I'm not making autumn decor right now, using a scarecrow in a project was quite a challenge. However, I decided to break it apart and just make use of the rake and bird nest from the scarecrow's hands. However, I did save his head, so you might see it again this fall. To create a background for the miniature rake and bird nest, I grabbed a Dollar Tree house-shaped box and cut out a pretty floral piece of scrapbook paper, which I adhered inside the box with glue stick. Then I painted the exterior of the house box with coordinating moss green chalk paint. Next, I used wood glue to attach a small piece of fencing along the front of the wood box. I think this fencing came from the dollhouse section at Hobby Lobby, but I'm not sure because I've had it for a really long time. Next, I cut a small piece of styrofoam to fit behind the fencing and covered it with reindeer moss before gluing it in place. Then I cut some small floral stems to stick into the styrofoam. Next, I hot glued that adorable little metal rake along the front edge of the box. I hot glued a little reindeer moss on the bottom of the broken bird nest to disguise the broken ceramic, and then I hot glued the bird nest in among the flowers. As a finishing touch, I added a little Walmart wood tag left over from Christmas. I covered up the holiday greeting with a little paint and a couple stickers that I ordered from Temu. Madison gave me quite a challenge when she picked out this very fake-looking spoon mounted to a 1970s burnt orange background. But it wasn't actually vintage because it had a TJ Maxx price tag on the back. I started this transformation by loosening and removing the nuts holding the spoon in place. And then I cleaned the frame and painted the sides with kudzu green chalk paint. When the paint was dry, I lightly distressed the edges and applied some clear wax. Next, I traced around the frame and cut out a large section from an old poster that I had ordered from Amazon and never used. I applied a good quality glue stick to the back of the poster and then pressed it into the frame, smoothing out any wrinkles. I could have stopped there, but you know I didn't. I had a piece of what might be petrified wood in my stash. I cut off a small piece on my miter saw and glued it inside the frame. Next, I drilled a hole in the center of the piece of wood to have a place to add some fern stems. I added stems of varying heights to create some visual interest. I felt that I would somehow be cheating if I didn't use the fake spoon in a project too. So I started off by giving it a couple coats of light gray chalk paint. And then I found an oval frame in my stash that was just slightly larger than the end of the spoon, and I painted its frame with the same light gray chalk paint. When the paint was dry, I lightly distressed both the spoon and the frame with some 220 grit sandpaper, and then I applied a coat of white wax carefully dabbing away the excess. At first, I wasn't sure what I wanted to put in the frame, but I ended up choosing a piece of leftover wallpaper because I loved the way the colors coordinated with the gray paint. To attach the frame to the spoon, I drilled a small hole through the spoon and then screwed through the spoon and into the back of the wood frame. I wanted this to look less like a spoon and more like an ornate frame. So I cut a few floral stems and some faux greenery and wired them together and then wired them to the spoon handle just above the picture frame. And to finish it off, I tied some lace ribbon around it to hide the wire holding the florals to the spoon. I would never have thought it, but this spoon ended up being my favorite project. I have to say that I can understand why a Goodwill employee chose this wall plaque as the ugliest thing in the store. The real question is, why was Goodwill asking almost $5 for this? I began the transformation by sanding off the paper image and attempting to sand off some of the very dark stain on the frame. Once I was finished sanding and looked at the pitted frame, it reminded me of a morel mushroom. So I decided what better image to use than a vintage print of some adorable mushrooms. I'll have the image I used linked in the description box. I printed it out on regular copy paper, and then I applied a very thin but even coat of Mod Podge, both to the wood plaque and to the back of the paper. Then I carefully adhered the paper to the wood, smoothing out any wrinkles. I let it dry for several hours, and then I came back and brushed on a top protective coat of Mod Podge. I also sanded the edges of the paper a little to give it a more natural appearance. Well, what do you think? Would you hang this mushroom plaque in your home? In fact, I'd love to know, would you use any of today's ugly projects in your home?
Thank you so much for watching today. And if you'd like to see another video where I attempt to transform the ugliest things I can find at the thrift store, please let me know in the comments. And don't forget to check out Sarah of Sarah's October Home. Well, that's all for today. Hope to see you next week. Bye-bye for now.